What do you think?
Yeah, so, I mean,
in terms of keeping your options
I would
open?
say from a principal perspective, I would say if you accept one offer, you stick with it, which is what I did. And I did exactly that for that reason. But I mean, I do think, objectively speaking, if you wanted to keep your options open, but I mean, I don't really know that for articles you could really keep your options open, especially if the firms that you're getting into are sort of kind of on the same level.
Okay, right? Yeah.
The issue with being so focused on, 2 years or 3 years as an associate, 3 years as senior associate, now I'm ready for director, is that most of the times you're actually just not ready because all that you've been doing is capturing in your billing system 0.5, 2.5, and sometimes you find yourself cutting some corners.
Yeah.
But then once you make it as a director, what's expected of you, in fact, billing is just a little bit of what's expected of you. There's actually more that's expected of you.
Yeah. To my YouTube channel. No, I haven't started a podcast, but I've decided to take my legal segments a little bit more serious. So got a studio to shoot my upcoming legal topics, and today I have Api as a guest, which you guys have asked so many times to see on my channel. So finally he's made it, and yeah, we're going to talk about briefly his career and what he does in TMT, Technology, Media, and Telecommunications. Api, say hi to the peoples.
Hi.
Is that it?
Hi to the peoples.
Okay, cool. Without wasting any time, I'm going to get straight into our interview or questions, right? So, Api, obviously I know you. You studied at UCT. And the question I have for you today, or the first question I have for you today is, when you were applying for law school, was UCT the only university you applied to, or did you apply to other universities but ultimately choose UCT?
Yeah, it was just UCT.
And why?
It was kind of the only one that I knew of and had an interest in. I had gone to some of the career exhibitions and I found it interesting. I'd never gone anywhere else, so I just applied there. But also I had time, right? Because I did this during the year that I wasn't studying. Yeah. So I could afford to not get a place because I had an entire year to do it.
Yeah. Also, Api finished school quite early because he's a genius, right? 16?
You're talking about... Yeah. I don't know if I'm a genius, but okay. I think they just took me to school early, that's all.
Perhaps. All right. And then how did you find law school at UCT? Apparently it's very hard.
So I found it very interesting. It was obviously a new environment that I wasn't familiar with. It was completely different to what I knew. You know, one came from a village and a township life, and then you dropped into this new space of suburban life, university, international. It's, you know, you hardly find people like you. So it was different and quite difficult to say the least, but, you know, one adapts over time.
Yeah. And law in general? The degree, like, how did you find it?
The degree itself, it was very difficult, and I can say it was very difficult relative to the other things that I did. One of the things they made you do, UCT Law School, I don't know about other law schools, is they make you do electives, and some of the electives that I did were quite, were doable. I was quite comfortable with them, but I found the legal material and the course itself quite difficult. But I think that had a lot to do with, the fact that it was a new environment. I found that people that had gone to different schools that would have perhaps given them a better preparation were, doing better. But obviously, over time, one picks up, how things are done and you get better and ultimately, you figure it out.
Yeah. All right. Did you enjoy it?
I don't know. I think it was school. That's what it was. Okay. I did what I must do.
I enjoyed law, actually.
Really?
I did. My favorite subject,
It's probably because you didn't go to UCT.
No. But my favorite subject.
I do.
So, the general rule is that you apply for articles when you're in your third year of LLB. Some people apply in second year, and some even get opportunities in their first year, although that's rare, right? And I know that you applied for articles in your fourth year.
Yeah.
Did you find it challenging to find articles because you applied in fourth year? And also, why wait to fourth year to apply for articles?
Yeah, I don't know that I waited until fourth year. I think you get in and there's a lot going on in the school. You're trying to graduate. That's the most important thing. And I think, like I said, the first few years were quite, shaky. It was quite challenging. And like you said, if you're juniors, you get in and you apply for articles in your second year and everybody just wants to snatch you. I don't think my transcript was very exciting in my first and second year. And this is not unique to me also, I must just mention this. Most of my comrades from UCT will tell you this, mostly the ones that look like me. It is a very challenging environment, and if you're new to it, it can be very hard to adapt. And I think that the way they do things, I think they set it up not so much for for locals from like the local little high schools that we go to. So when you get into it and you're trying to figure things out, it takes quite a bit of time to get a handle of things.
Yeah.
So it's not that I was waiting for the fourth year. It just was not the priority at the time. I just wanted to graduate.
Yeah.
But then at a certain point, once I'd gotten a bit of a groove, I sort of kind of figured things out. I mean, you never really get to that point, but at a certain point, I needed to get a job, right?
Yeah.
And I then started doing vacation programs. I went to some firms, medium-sized firm in Cape Town. We did some vac work with some of the guys that I ended up working with, actually. So, then I started, I think, in my third year applying for vac work, but it was just applying to all law firms that I could, get to. And some of the guys would come to campus and they would introduce themselves, and after that would start, following up and trying to get vac work. And I did get vac work in one other firm in my third year. And I don't know what happened with that, actually, but I didn't end up applying for articles. But in my final year, obviously now it was very serious that I do get a job. I think I started applying in the second quarter of that year. I applied to, I think, 2 or 3 places. One of them didn't respond, if I remember correctly. One responded, which is where we met for the first time to do vac work, and the other one responded after I'd gotten a gig at the one that we met. So that really didn't help. But I do think if maybe they had gotten back to me earlier, I would have probably ended up with them, because they were a bigger firm and I think they were more attractive than the other firm that I ended up with. But it ended up being a good decision anyway. So it worked out.
I mean, obviously we wouldn't have met. But
Exactly.
what I want to say is on this topic, right? You said the other firm, you didn't pursue it because you had already
100%.
gotten articles, right?
Absolutely.
But is that advice you would give to people who are actually looking for articles? Because keeping your options open is always a good idea.
Yeah.
And I always say to people who've got like more than one offer, wait until you're sure which one you want to go with. Although sometimes firms do have the tendency of giving you a deadline of accepting an offer.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, so, I mean,
in terms of keeping your options
I would
open?
say from a principal perspective, I would say if you accept one offer, you stick with it, which is what I did. And I did exactly that for that reason. But I mean, I do think, objectively speaking, if you wanted to keep your options open, but I mean, I don't really know that for articles you could really keep your options open, especially if the firms that you're getting into are sort of kind of on the same level.
Okay,
right? And what you must also take into account at the time, I sort of had a keen interest in intellectual property. Well, what I thought I knew as IP. So the firm that I got into at the time was the best spot I thought was the best spot to be in for purposes of IP. And so that decision to stick to my principle wasn't too difficult.
Okay.
And I didn't know much about the other firm anyway.
Okay.
And also remember, when you're in varsity, you know of, top 5 law firms, but really you don't really know what that means. It's only once you get in that you get a sense of what those firms are about.
Yeah.
And maybe now, if I had to choose between the two, I would probably go for the other firm. But at the time, I was very happy with my decision.
Okay. All right. So you served your articles predominantly in IP, right?
100%.
That was your experience. Then you moved. You worked in a commercial law firm, right?
Yeah.
General commercial, Corpcom, all right? And then you ended up where you are right now, right?
100%.
Big firm. So, how was your experience leading up to where you are right now?
I mean, I would say it all worked out right. I think, there's no experience that's wasted experience. Like anything that you experience, especially work-wise, it will always contribute in one way or another. Although I couldn't quite connect the dots at the time, I wasn't really making all of these strategic moves. If I do this and then do this, I'll end up there. I was just trying what I felt at the time made sense. So one of the things about the firm that I moved into after where I did my articles, what the firm was offering, which made it very attractive, was the fact that they were offering me corporate and commercial experience, which I hadn't gotten at the other firm because it's an IP law firm. They have a corporate and commercial department, but it's very, very small. And, it's reserved for the chosen ones. And I wasn't the chosen one, obviously. So that worked for as long as it did. But, at some point I felt I needed to get into a bigger space, into a bigger team and be exposed perhaps to bigger transactions. And that's what I started pursuing. And I was fortunate enough. And when I was pursuing it, actually, I was still pursuing it from I wanted to get into corporate and commercial when I was pursuing it. So the first time I met the approach, it was for that. But I went for the first assessment, for the first interview. But when I went back a couple of weeks later, they, told me that they had a position like this. And it sounded very attractive to me for two reasons. It was giving me a chance to tap into my IP experience, however little, and tap into my corporate and commercial experience. Which I thought at the time was a little bit vast because I had done that, for a solid year. And I was much older when I was doing it, and the training I was getting was much more focused. So it was intellectual property, it was corporate and commercial from a drafting perspective. But then there was a little bit of specialization in it, which was the technology side, which was the telecommunications side, which was the media side. That sounded very exciting to me because then I get to do a bit of all of this. The experience I have in drafting, it comes in very handy. Experience I have in intellectual property comes in very handy. Then I get to learn new areas of specialization, which I've always wanted to do. You sort of want to, you can be a general practitioner, but it also helps to be a specialist as well. So I felt I was getting a bit of both. Get a bit of experience in general drafting, corporate and commercial, get a bit of experience in some form of specialization. And that just combined all of that. But it wasn't because I was just very strategic. I knew nothing about TMT before I got into it. It's only once they told me about it and it sounded very appealing. Then I started educating myself in the area. And a couple of years later, Bob's your uncle.
Okay, so here's what I've picked up from what you've saying, of what you've just said, right? That it actually can be quite useful to have experience in related legal fields before specializing, because it actually then helps you do your job better.
Yeah.
Right?
Also, how do you even know what to specialize in if you haven't done anything else?
Yeah, right. Yeah. What we see now with big law firms, right? Or law firms in general, there's a tendency of wanting to rope in CLPs and having them specialize from the get-go. So there's a limitation in rotations, so you don't get exposure in other legal departments. And when you're done with your articles, then you become an associate and you practice in that field all the way leading up to director if you choose to stay in that legal field or in that practice, right? Practice area. And my thing is that I think I see the advantage in specializing from the beginning, but I think it can also be limiting in the sense that you don't get exposure to other legal fields that might actually assist you in what you end up specializing in. And I think from what I've picked up from what you said, that it can be actually quite useful to have related experience, but that would have to be related to what you ultimately specialize in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So let's get into what you do a little bit more, right?
Okay.
You do TMT. What are your day-to-day tasks and responsibilities?
like I said, it's mostly drafting. Drafting agreements, drafting. It really does sound boring now that I'm listening to myself. But it's not as boring as I make it sound. But it's really drafting. It's a bit of what you would do because it's also sort of like a subset of corporate and commercial law, right? You're still drafting agreements. In fact, even in general corporate and commercial agreements, you still have an aspect of it that's technology, or that could, include any other area that I practice in. But strictly speaking, I draft, agreements related to, different types of transactions in technology. It could be your sourcing agreements, it could be your development and maintenance and payments and all sorts of things, but all in the space of technology.
And media?
Media as well, but a little bit of it. But that area is, so technology is developing in South Africa. Media is also, it's been around for a while, but it's not as big as it is in other parts of the world. So that part of my practice is probably about 5 to 10%.
Okay.
A big part of it is technology. Very little of telecommunications that I do, but maybe about 5 to 10% as well. Technology is a big part of it. Of course, data protection being a big part of that, with the new legislation that's in place that regulates data protection. I deal quite a bit with that. So technology, data protection, that's really a very big chunk of what I do, maybe 60 to 70%. Excuse the mathematics.
Okay.
I did that split.
And which courses then tie in university? Which courses tie in with what you're practicing in right now? Because, somebody out there might be thinking, okay, TMT sounds nice, but which courses are they supposed to be focusing on? Or are those like general courses that they offer anyway under the degree? Because something like media law, and I don't know if the media law we do in varsity, which at Tux was an elective, is the same media law you practice in TMT.
So the long and short of it is, I did IP in varsity. I did IP as a module. I did my dissertation in IP because I thought I had an interest in IP. But I could never tell you, I would be lying if I did. If I said to you, the fact that I've got, in my transcript IP, and the fact that my paper was an IP has helped me so much, I really would be lying. I don't know that, the LLB we offer in South Africa, probably elsewhere in the world as well, I don't know that it offers you practical experience that you can touch and say, this is tangible. I can take this and use it in my day-to-day practice. I think what you do as an attorney, and I think it's important to know this, you learn it in practice. Starting from the day they tell you to go and print something, that's where the learning starts. When you look at what it is that you're printing, and not just print it, and everything else that comes after that. So, to answer your question, you can do some stuff that would make the content of what you do a little bit familiar. You can do your IP, you can write a paper in that, or media, whatever else really you want to specialize in, maybe things like tax. But really in my space, I think it's just an example, like something that you could do in varsity that might be helpful in practice. But by the time you're done with university, tax law has moved on. The point being that I think all that, varsity would help you with is just teach you how to work, just teach you how to prioritize and plan and just really interpret the law. But what I do, I learned in practice. I really, really learned everything I know in practice. I would have learned all the other softer skills from varsity and the practice years before I got into this role that I'm in. But it's practice. It's just getting in, get your feet wet and just go at it.
Yes, thank you. You've answered my question. And I think I'd like to pose the same question now from a practice perspective. If you are in practice as a CA or a CLP, what practice areas do you think one should get experience in order for them to get a better experience of TMT as a whole, if they do end up in that department?
So I think, like I said, most of what you'll do as part of your training will help you one way or another. But of course, there are some areas that if you could choose, I would suggest that you get into. So obviously, if you get yourself into some corporate and commercial position, there you're going to draft, right? most of what we do is drafting. So if you can get that out the way, if you know how to draft, just generally, you are already 30% into it, right? That's a skill that nobody can teach you other than by just doing it. I suppose you can be taught, but you must just get drafting. And a very valuable skill. A very important skill. So you need to just start drafting. But there are other areas that we've found very, very important with what we do, where surprisingly employment is also important. We've had cases where the employment area of law was actually quite useful in interpreting some of this, specifically from a data protection perspective. So we've needed to get some advice, we've needed to get a view from, the employment colleagues, and sometimes from tax. But I mean, you can't do all of that. You can't do tax, corporate and commercial. You can't do all of that. But if I were to say choose one, I'd say get yourself into corporate and commercial. If you do the best that you can, learn drafting. That's very important. Drafting in general, anything you can draft, as simple as an NDA to something as complex as a, multifaceted mergers and acquisitions transaction, just get drafting.
Yeah. So I hear what you're saying. And then the other question that I wanted to ask you was that, do you think that TMT as a whole, as a practice area, legal practice area, is gaining more traction now than it did before? Is it sort of like a new area of law? Has it always been there, but not much was happening because, for example, maybe Poppy was still in the pipeline? Is it an area of law that, people can find that there's a lot of work opportunity?
Yeah, so, it was there, but we're just waiting for Poppy because TMT's Poppy.
This is an inside joke.
Anyway. So it's always been there, but it's still developing. It's always been there for a number of years. I mean, there are people that have been practicing in this space 20, 30, 40 years before me. Surely then it's something that's always been there, but it really is still developing. There are some types of work that other colleagues practicing in other parts of the world are doing that I'm not even exposed to, because that's just where the country is, that's where the space is right now, but it is really developing and it's going quite quickly. So if you want to get into a space like this, you want to specialize in something, now is a good time to get in. If you want to be a specialist in something at some point in the future, this would be a good space to get in, and now would be a good time.
Okay. I'm sure they've heard you, that you are advocating for TMT. I think it's boring anyway. That's just me. I've never had experience with technology stuff. I've seen technology agreements in a due diligence, and I got a headache. That's me.
I think you mean difficult.
Okay, I'm moving away now from what you do, but I'm wrapping up. Generally, it takes an average about 8 years, right, to make it to director.
Yeah.
Am I right? About 8 years.
8, 9.
2 years as a CLP, 3 years as an associate, 3 years as a senior associate, and then you get to director level. About 8. And that's if you working towards those targets and reaching those KPIs on a consistent basis, at least from associate level up until director, right? You're a director. What do you say it takes? I'm rephrasing. What can you say it takes to make it to director level? At least at the average pace that it takes a person to get there. It's average, but not a lot of people make it there in that 8-year time frame.
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of sounding cliche, but I mean, it takes quite a bit of work, quite a bit of dedication. I mean, you have to sacrifice certain things. You are mostly going to be working a little bit above the average person. You're gonna have lots of sleepless nights, and you're gonna work quite a bit. And, you're not going to cry a few nights because it's really not easy. But I think if you're focused enough and you're dedicated and you've made a few sacrifices, I think anyone can make it through, but of course with a bit of luck as well. But also I think what one must take into account is that I think it would be a lie for us to sit here and say, we can say on average it's 8 years, but really that's a base case scenario type of thing. There are people that are brilliant. There are people that are shooting the lights out insofar as targets are concerned and all the rest of those other KPIs, but they still don't make director. in 8 years, from varsity. But that's because it's also a product of how the firm works, right? Different firms work differently. All that you will be after 3 years as an associate, you'll be eligible to be a senior associate, and you have a better chance of getting into senior associate than you do director, because the requirements are a little bit higher.
Yeah.
And once you become a senior associate, I think the only thing you can really say is usually on average, firms would say you are eligible to apply after 3 years of being an associate. You're also eligible to apply after 3 years of being a senior associate. But what I've seen happen in practice, some people take longer than that for different reasons. Because if you're a senior associate and what's expected of you is different to what a director is expected to do. And what I've seen some of my colleagues do, either the people that they work for, the team is just not ready to support another director, because it's not just another step like being a senior associate. The team, the practice has to be able to support a new director, because obviously you're drawing more from the profits of the practice. Maybe the practice simply can't afford one because there's just not enough work to support a director. Your rates are higher, so there's quite a lot of things that get considered. What I don't want people doing is looking at themselves and their progression and think, ooh, I was an associate for 3 years. I was an associate for 4 years, and I was a senior associate for another 4 years. Ooh, I must have failed. I think you must just take into account that it's a question of circumstances. You're only eligible for the next step at a certain point, but everything around has to really, really align. It might be that you make it quicker. Actually, I've seen people do that. I've seen people make it quicker than 3 years because the opportunity was right and the person was performing at a level that, the team and the practice, the firm just felt the person was ready to get in. But I think, we should all just be kind to ourselves, give ourselves a little bit of time, a little bit of grace, and just forget about, because these things come anyway, just focus on what you are expected to do. Just get in, work hard, bill, and just keep billing. That's really important.
And enjoy your money.
Oh, the little money that you get, because it's really little, right, relative to what you do. But that's why I'm saying forget about that. Forget about the money, the little money that you get. Forget about the promotions, because they'll come. At a certain point, once you meet certain targets, no one can deny you because you just are ready. The issue with being so focused on, 2 years or 3 years as an associate, 3 years as a senior associate, now I'm ready for director, is that most of the times you're actually just not ready, because all that you've been doing is capturing in your billing system 0.5, 2.5, and sometimes you find yourself cutting some corners.
Yeah.
But then once you make it as a director, what's expected of you, in fact, billing is just a little bit of what's expected of you. There's actually more that's expected of you.
Yeah.
And if you didn't give yourself times and use the tools that the firm has at your disposal to get ready, because the firm won't do it for you. They might look at your numbers and everything else that you do and think, ooh, she's ready. But maybe you're not, because you didn't give yourself the opportunity to just learn your craft, be the best at what you do, be known at the firm. It's also just easier to put your name out there as a senior associate. It's actually just easy because there's no pressure. By the time you get promoted, almost everybody knows. And usually these firms have a voting process. It's also just easy for people to vote for you into partnership if you're going to be a partner, because they know you. They know that every time, we need somebody with public law experience, at least your girl. And that becomes very important once you become a director, because now you're a specialist in that area. You need to start establishing a name within the firm, and lots of partners and directors at these firms, before you put your name out there, you depend quite a lot on the rest of your colleagues within the firm.